You're nothing but pathetic dead weight, Mitchell.
Captain Marcus Thompson's roar echoed through Fort Thunder's tactical briefing room, making 200 elite soldiers turn in unison. His massive frame and combat camo loomed over the smallest person in the room, casting a shadow that seemed to swallow her whole. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen in the center, her petite figure drowning in an oversized administrative uniform that hung like a tent on her slim frame. Her blonde hair, tied in a messy high bun, had come partially undone, wisps of curls framing her porcelain face dotted with natural freckles. Those gentle blue eyes stayed fixed on the polished floor, while her trembling hands clutched a manila folder against her chest like armor. "I'm sorry, Captain," her voice barely rose above a whisper, triggering waves of laughter from the assembled warriors. "Sorry?" Thompson stepped closer, muscles rippling beneath his camo uniform. "This is Fort Thunder, home of Alpha Team, the deadliest unit in the military. And you—" He flicked the folder from her hands with such force that paper scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. "You're a waste of space, a burden, a liability." The Alpha Team, 12 of the base's most elite operators, erupted in mocking laughter. Lieutenant David Brooks, lean and sharp-featured, with a perpetual sneer, mimicked typing on an invisible keyboard, pantomiming Sarah's desk job, while others whistled and jeered. Sergeant Williams, built like a linebacker, with arms thick as tree trunks, actually threw a crumpled paper ball at her head. I'm just doing my assigned duties," Sarah stammered, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered papers, her small hands shaking as she tried to organize them. "Duties?" Thompson's combat boot came down on one of the documents with deliberate cruelty, the leather sole grinding the paper into the floor. "Your only duty is to stay out of real soldiers' way. 45 seconds. That's all my team needs to neutralize any threat. You couldn't last 5 seconds in real combat." But as Sarah took a slow, measured breath, her shoulders subtly aligned in a way only highly trained eyes would recognize. The trembling in her hands stilled for just a fraction of a second, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. And in that moment of stillness, no one noticed how her fingers brushed against her collar, concealing the top edge of something massive hidden beneath that gray shirt. The briefing room at Fort Thunder was a monument to military precision. 200 seats arranged in perfect rows, walls lined with tactical displays and maps of global hot zones. At the front, a massive screen displayed the Alpha Team's statistics: mission success rate of 98%, average engagement time of 45 seconds, 0 casualties in 3 years of operations. These were the gods of war, and Sarah Mitchell was the mouse that had somehow wandered into their temple. Thompson circled her like a shark scenting blood in the water, his heavy boots echoing against the polished concrete floor. "You know what you are, Mitchell? You're the reason the good soldiers die, because when bullets start flying, we have to waste time protecting useless civilians like you instead of completing the mission." Sarah's head stayed down, blonde curls falling forward to hide her face. "I understand, sir." "No, you don't understand anything." Thompson grabbed her by the shoulder, his massive hand nearly encompassing her entire deltoid, and shoved her toward the wall. The force should have sent her sprawling, but Sarah's body moved with the push, flowing like water, her feet sliding into a stance that absorbed the momentum perfectly. She ended up against the wall, yes, but standing, not fallen. If this opening grabbed your attention, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more military justice stories. By the way, I'm curious, where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below so we can see how far these stories of hidden strength travel around the world. Lieutenant Brooks stepped forward, his hawkish features twisted in amusement. "Hey, Cap, I've got an idea. Since Mitchell here needs to understand what real soldiers do, why doesn't she give us a demonstration? Show us some of that deadly paperwork skills." He pulled out his phone, already recording. "This is going to be viral. Watch this pencil pusher try to act tough." The crowd of soldiers formed a circle, boxing Sarah in. She stood in the center, her gray t-shirt slightly askew from Thompson's shove, revealing just a hint of toned muscle at her shoulder that contradicted her seemingly frail appearance. Her eyes remained downcast, but there was something in her peripheral vision tracking, cataloging positions, exits, potential weapons. "Please, Captain Thompson," Sarah's voice was soft, almost pleading. "I don't want any trouble. I'll file a transfer request today." "Transfer?" Thompson laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "You think you can just run away? No, Mitchell. You're going to learn what it means to be in the presence of real warriors." He turned to his team. "Brooks, Show her that coffee trick you do." Brooks grinned and grabbed a full cup of coffee from a nearby table. Without warning, he accidentally bumped into Sarah, pouring the entire contents over the stack of papers she'd just finished collecting. The hot liquid splashed across the documents, destroying hours of work in seconds. "Oops," Brooks said with fake concern. "Clumsy me. Better clean that up, Mitchell. That's about your speed, right? Cleaning up messes?" Sarah knelt again, but this time her movements were different. As she pulled napkins from her pocket to dab at the coffee, her hands moved with surgical precision. Each motion was economical, purposeful. She separated the salvageable documents from the ruined ones in seconds, her fingers dancing across the papers with a speed that made Brooks step back slightly. Sergeant Williams noticed the unusual efficiency. "Hey, Mitchell, you seem to know your way around organizing things. Tell me, what's the effective range of an M4 carbine?" The question was meant to humiliate. What would a clerk know about weapons? But Sarah's response came without hesitation. 500 meters for point targets, 600 for area targets, though actual effective range depends on ammunition type, barrel length, and environmental conditions. The 14.5-inch barrel DM4A1 has slightly different ballistics than the 20-inch M16A4. The room went quiet for a moment. Williams's smirk faltered. That wasn't textbook knowledge. That was experience talking. Thompson's face darkened. "Lucky guess. Probably memorized some manual while filing paperwork." He grabbed Sarah's wrist, yanking her to her feet. "But knowledge isn't application, is it? Come on, dead weight. Let's see what you're really made of." He started dragging her toward the door leading to the training area, and the entire assembly of soldiers followed, sensing blood in the water. Sarah stumbled along, her small frame dwarfed by Thompson's bulk, but her feet found their balance with each step, in a way that suggested years of training in maintaining stability while being manhandled. The training area was a massive warehouse converted into a combat simulation zone, padded floors for hand-to-hand combat, weapons racks along the walls, and enough space for full tactical exercises. Thompson shoved Sarah into the center, while his alpha team formed a semicircle around her. "All right, Mitchell," Thompson announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "Since you know so much about weapons, let's see you handle one." He pulled an M4 from the rack and tossed it at her. Sarah caught it. Not fumbled, not struggled, caught it. One-handed, her small hand finding the exact balance point of the weapon, her other hand coming up to properly cradle it in a perfect ready position. The motion was so smooth, so natural, that several soldiers blinked in surprise. "Take it apart," Thompson commanded. "You've got 2 minutes." Sarah looked at the weapon in her hands, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not fear or uncertainty, but something closer to nostalgia. Her fingers found the takedown pins with disturbing familiarity. She disassembled the M4 in 23 seconds. The warehouse went silent. 23 seconds was faster than most Alpha Team members. The weapons lay in perfect order on the ground, each component aligned precisely, magazines separated, bolt carrier group broken down to its individual parts. Thompson's jaw clenched. "Beginner's luck. Do it blindfolded." Someone tossed Thompson a bandana, and he tied it roughly around Sarah's eyes, making sure to pull her hair in the process. Several blonde strands came loose from her bun, falling around her face. "Go!" he barked. Sarah's hands moved without hesitation. Her fingers danced across the weapon parts with a grace that spoke of thousands of repetitions. The metallic clicks and slides created an almost musical rhythm. 25 seconds blindfolded. When she pulled off the blindfold, her blue eyes met Thompson's for the first time, and there was something in them that made him take an involuntary step back. Not defiance, not anger, just a quiet confidence that didn't match the trembling clerk persona. "That's impossible," Brooks muttered, his phone still recording, but his hand shaking slightly. Sarah discreetly adjusted her military-grade tactical smartwatch, its reinforced sapphire crystal face, hiding advanced biometric sensors capable of monitoring stress levels and combat readiness. This $2,000 device, standard issue for special operations units, could withstand depths of 200 meters and temperatures from -40 degrees Celsius to 70 degrees Celsius while maintaining encrypted satellite communication with command centers worldwide. Her fingers brushed across its surface in a specific pattern, not checking the time, but activating a recording function that would document everything that was about to happen. William stepped forward, trying to salvage his captain's authority. "Okay, so You can take apart a weapon, big deal. Let's talk tactics. You're pinned down, 3 hostiles at your 12 o'clock, 2 flanking from 3 and 9. What's your move? Sarah tilted her head slightly, considering. Insufficient information. What's my loadout? Team composition, terrain features? Are we talking urban environment or open field? What's the mission objective? Elimination or extraction? The questions came rapid fire, each one demonstrating a level of tactical thinking that shouldn't exist in someone who supposedly spent their days filing reports. Williams glanced at Thompson nervously. Standard loadout, no team support, urban environment, elimination, smoke grenade to obscure sightlines, displace immediately to avoid predetermined fire zones, use vertical terrain to break the flanking maneuver. Most fighters don't look up. Engage the flankers first since they're isolated, then concentrate on the main force. Priority on disrupting their communication and coordination. Urban environment means plenty of hard cover and concealment options. Turn their numbers advantage into a liability by forcing them into each other's fields of fire. Sarah delivered the tactical breakdown in a monotone voice, as if reciting a grocery list. But every soldier in that warehouse recognized the voice of experience. This wasn't theoretical knowledge. This was someone who had lived through these scenarios. Have you ever been underestimated at work or school? Share your story below. I read every comment and love hearing how you proved them wrong. Your experiences inspire these stories. Thompson's face had turned an alarming shade of red. His authority was crumbling with each passing second, and everyone could see it. Enough games, he snarled. You want to play soldier, Mitchell? Fine. Let's see how you handle real pressure. He gestured to his team. Brooks, Williams, Anderson, Johnson, sparring formation. Mitchell, you've got 2 choices. Walk out of here right now and submit your resignation, or face my team in combat training. Your choice, dead weight. Sarah's hands visibly trembled as she looked at the 4 elite soldiers moving into position around her. Each one was over 6 feet tall, muscled, trained in every form of combat from Krav Maga to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brooks was cracking his knuckles, Williams rolling his shoulders. Anderson and Johnson synchronized their movements with practiced ease. Please, Captain, Sarah's voice cracked. This isn't necessary. I'll leave. I'll transfer. Whatever you want. Too late for that, Thompson growled. You wanted to show off? Now deal with the consequences. Don't worry. Medical's on standby. Sergeant Rodriguez is excellent at setting broken bones. At the mention of medical, a woman in scrubs pushed through the crowd. Sergeant Emma Rodriguez, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her brown eyes flashing with anger. Captain Thompson, this is completely against regulations. She's administrative staff, not combat personnel. Thompson rounded on her. Stay out of this, Rodriguez. Unless you want to join her. Emma stood her ground. Sir, I'm filing a formal complaint about this. You can't just... I said stay out of it. Thompson shoved Emma back, and she stumbled into the crowd. Sarah's entire demeanor changed in that instant. The trembling stopped, her shoulders squared. When she spoke, her voice was different, lower, steadier, carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Don't touch her. Thompson turned back, surprised by the change in tone. What did you say? I said, Sarah repeated, her blue eyes now locked onto his. Don't touch her. Sergeant Rodriguez is trying to do her job. If you have a problem with me, keep it with me. The warehouse had gone deadly quiet. Something had shifted in the atmosphere, like the pressure drop before a storm. Oh, now you want to be brave? Thompson laughed, but it sounded forced. Fine. Boys, looks like Mitchell wants to play, remember? Training accidents happen all the time. The 4 Alpha team members began circling Sarah. She stood perfectly still in the center, her breathing slowing to a combat rhythm. Her hands hung loose at her sides, and she shifted her weight onto the balls of her feet almost imperceptibly. Brooks attacked first, coming in with a right cross aimed at her head. Sarah didn't block. She simply wasn't there when the fist arrived. She'd shifted 6 inches to the left, just enough for the punch to whistle past her ear. Brooks, overextended, stumbled forward, and Sarah's foot accidentally found its way into his path. He went down hard, face first into the padded floor. Lucky dodge, Williams muttered, then rushed in with a wrestling takedown attempt. Sarah's response was poetry in motion. She sprawled backward, her hips dropping, as her hands found Williams's shoulders. Using his own momentum, she guided him past her and directly into Anderson, who was coming from the other angle. The 2 soldiers collided with a meaty thud, tangling together in a heap of limbs. Johnson, seeing his teammates down, approached more cautiously. He threw a series of jabs, testing her defenses. Sarah weaved through them like water flowing around stones, never quite where Johnson expected her to be. Her movements were minimal, efficient, almost lazy in their economy. "Stand still and fight," Johnson snarled, frustrated. Sarah obliged. She stood perfectly still. Johnson threw a haymaker with all his strength behind it. At the last possible second, Sarah dropped to one knee, and Johnson's fist connected solidly with Brooks, who had just gotten back to his feet behind her. Brooks went down again, this time seeing stars. The entire exchange had taken less than 30 seconds, and Sarah hadn't thrown a single offensive strike. She'd simply redirected their aggression into chaos. Thompson had seen enough. His reputation, his authority, everything was crumbling. With a roar of rage, he charged at Sarah himself, all 230 pounds of muscle and fury. Sarah tried to sidestep, but Thompson had anticipated it. His massive hand caught her gray t-shirt, and he yanked hard, intending to throw her to the ground. The fabric tore with a wood, visceral rip that echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. The gray t-shirt split from collar to mid-back, and as it fell away, 200 soldiers collectively gasped at what was revealed. The dragon was magnificent and terrifying as in equal measure. Starting at the base of Sarah's neck and extending down her entire back was a massive eastern dragon, rendered in black ink so detailed it seemed to breathe with life. Its serpentine body coiled in an S pattern down her spine, each scale individually etched with microscopic precision. The dragon's head rested between her shoulder blades, its eyes somehow conveying both ancient wisdom and lethal intent even in ink. Its mouth was open in a silent roar, revealing fangs that looked sharp enough to draw blood from anyone who dared touch them. The dragon's body wrapped around a medieval broadsword that ran perfectly parallel to Sarah's spine. The sword's blade gleamed with metallic silver ink that caught the warehouse lights, creating an illusion of deadly sharpness. 7 stars surrounded the dragon and sword, each containing a Roman numeral from I to 7, arranged in a pattern that suggested a constellation of power. But it wasn't just the artistry that made every soldier in that warehouse step back in primal fear. It was what the dragon represented. This wasn't decorative body art. This was a military marking more classified than most people's security clearance. Below the dragon, in precise military font, were the words that changed everything. Dragon Unit, Instructor 001. Guardian of the 7 Stars. Syria, Afghanistan, classified, classified, classified. And at the very bottom, a date, 2015-2019 KIA. Thompson's grip on the torn shirt went completely slack. His face drained of color so fast that several people thought he might faint. "The dragon," he whispered, his voice cracking. You're the dragon. Dragon 7. The one who supposedly died in Syria," Sarah finished, her voice now carrying an edge that could cut steel. "The one who trained every special forces instructor in the military for 4 years. The one whose combat manual you quote from every day without even knowing it." Colonel Harrison, the base commander, had literally fallen to one knee, his hand over his heart in a gesture of profound respect. He was a silver-haired man in his 60s, with eyes that had seen too much war, and those eyes were now wide with disbelief. "Dragon 7, Major Mitchell, we were told you were killed in the ambush. The entire dragon unit was wiped out." The dragon tattoo seemed to move as Sarah breathed, its coils shifting with her muscle movements. Several soldiers were recording with shaking hands, knowing they were witnessing something that would become military legend. "Look at the stars," whispered someone who knew their military history. 7 stars, 7 operations. Each one was considered impossible. Each one succeeded with 0 casualties. Sarah slowly turned, giving everyone a clear view of the dragon. The detail was extraordinary. The dragon's claws gripped the sword's hilt, its tail wrapped around the blade's tip, and its wings, though folded, suggested the power to soar. Woven throughout the dragon's body were tiny symbols, unit patches, coordinates, dates, each one marking a mission, a life saved, a victory achieved. "The dragon isn't just a symbol," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "In Eastern mythology, dragons are protectors, guardians who appear humble until they reveal their true power. They can take any form, a fish, a snake, even a small bird, until the moment they choose to show their real nature. She looked directly at Thompson, who had backed against the wall, in terror. "You called me dead weight, Captain. In Chinese philosophy, there's a concept. The dragon at rest appears as a worm. You saw a worm. You mocked a worm. You attacked a worm." Her blue eyes blazed with controlled fury. "But you woke the dragon." Brooks had literally dropped to both knees, his phone clattering forgotten to the floor. The Dragon Unit Manual, Section 7. The perfect warrior is one who strikes without being seen, who wins without appearing to fight. You wrote that. You wrote the book we train from. Page 47, Sarah confirmed. The technique you just witnessed, redirecting aggression into chaos, is from Chapter 3. Every move I just demonstrated is in the manual you claim to have memorized. The dragon tattoo had scars running through it, bullet wounds, knife marks, shrapnel patterns, but instead of marring the design, they had been incorporated into it. The dragon bore the wounds as part of its body, making it appear battle-tested, unbreakable. The artist had turned trauma into art, weakness into strength. Each scar tells a story, Emma Rodriguez observed, her medical eye catching details others missed. Those bullet wounds near the dragon's heart. Someone shot you trying to kill the dragon, but the dragon survived. 3 bullets, Sarah confirmed. Syria, 2019. After my unit was betrayed and killed, I was left for dead in the desert. It took me 2 days to crawl to extraction, leaving a blood trail the dragon refused to let end. Someone in the crowd pulled up their phone, frantically searching. Holy, Dragon 7 is real. There's a classified file that just got declassified last month. Operative D7, presumed KIA. Syria. Solo elimination of 43 hostile targets during extraction. Highest decorated instructor in special operations history. Williams, still on the ground from their earlier encounter, was staring at the dragon with something approaching religious awe. My instructor at Ranger School used to tell us stories about the dragon. Said there was an operator who could take down an entire platoon without killing anyone, just using their own force against them. We thought it was mythology. Mythology, Sarah said quietly, is often just history that's been classified too long. The dragon's eyes seemed to follow people as Sarah moved, an optical illusion created by the masterful inkwork. Several soldiers actually stepped back when she turned their way, as if the dragon might leap from her skin and attack. The Dragon Unit was created to train the trainers, Harrison explained to those who didn't know the legend, his voice filled with reverence. 7 instructors, each a master of different combat disciplines. They were so classified that officially, they never existed. When they were reported killed in Syria, we lost decades of combat knowledge in a single day. Not lost, Sarah corrected. Hidden, waiting, watching, like a dragon in deep water, invisible until it chooses to rise. If you know what's coming next is going to be epic, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to see that true strength comes from within. The warehouse was in complete chaos now. Soldiers were pulling out phones, sharing the footage that was about to go viral across every military base in the country. The legendary Dragon 7, bearer of the dragon tattoo that marked the most elite instructor in military history, was not only alive but had been living among them as a mockingly dismissed clerk. "Why?" Thompson asked from his position against the wall, his voice broken. "Why all this deception? Why pretend to be weak?" Sarah looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Because men like you hide behind their rank and reputation. The only way to expose you was to become someone you'd never suspect, someone you'd be comfortable being your worst self around." She pulled the torn shirt closed as best she could, but the dragon was still partially visible, its eyes seeming to watch everyone in the warehouse. "You want to know the real irony, Thompson?" Sarah asked. "Dragons in Eastern mythology are symbols of justice. They bring rain to end droughts, but they also bring storms to punish the wicked. You and your network of weapons dealers, you're the drought that's been killing American soldiers, and I'm the storm you never saw coming." Colonel Harrison stepped forward, his bearing formal despite the chaos around them. "Major Mitchell, when you say network of weapons dealers..." Sarah pulled out her phone and projected files onto the warehouse's main screen. Financial records, shipping manifests, photographs, all showing Thompson and 5 members of Alpha Team moving military weapons to unauthorized buyers. 3 years, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. 3 years I've been investigating the weapons smuggling operation that got my unit killed. 3 years of playing dead, of being invisible, of listening to people like you mock and belittle me while I gathered evidence. The dragon tattoo shifted as she moved, and several people swore they saw it breathe. The optical illusion was so perfect that some soldiers unconsciously held their breath when the dragon's mouth seemed to open wider. Every insult, every shove, every moment of your pathetic power trip, I recorded it all. But more importantly, I recorded your conversations about the side business. The weapons you've been selling to cartels, the ammunition that ended up killing American soldiers overseas. Brooks found his voice from his position on the floor. This is insane. You can't prove anything. The dragon tattoo doesn't mean... Lieutenant David Brooks, Sarah interrupted. Account number 73942 in the Cayman Islands. Last deposit $50,000, 2 weeks ago. Sergeant Williams, you prefer Swiss banks. Account number 11765, balance of $230,000. Should I continue? The base's security system featured AI-powered threat detection software, part of a comprehensive military insurance package that covered everything from training accidents to combat operations. These specialized insurance policies, costing upwards of $50,000 annually per soldier, included advanced medical evacuation coverage and full disability benefits for service-related injuries. The same system that protected soldiers in legitimate operations had been documenting every illegal transaction, every suspicious movement, every piece of evidence Sarah had been carefully collecting. "The dragon sees everything," Sarah said softly, but her voice carried, "even when it appears to be sleeping." Military police were flooding into the warehouse now, surrounding Thompson and the implicated Alpha team members. Thompson was still staring at the dragon tattoo, unable to process that the mythical Dragon 7 had been the clerk he'd tormented for months. "The weapons that killed my unit," Sarah continued, her hand unconsciously touching one of the scars that ran through the dragon's body. "They were American weapons, military grade, reported as destroyed, but actually sold on the black market. Your weapons, Thompson." The dragon seemed to snarl as she spoke, another trick of the incredible artistry. Several soldiers stepped back involuntarily. 47 American service members, Sarah said, each word dropping like a stone into still water. 63 coalition forces, over 100 civilians, all killed by weapons you sold for profit. Emma Rodriguez approached slowly, offering Sarah a military jacket to cover the torn shirt. As Sarah put it on, the dragon disappeared beneath the fabric, but its presence remained palpable. Everyone in that warehouse knew they had witnessed something that would become legend, the return of the dragon. This story of patience and justice resonates with so many of you. Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss the next tale of hidden warriors among us. Thompson and his conspirators were being led away in handcuffs, but Thompson turned back one last time. "The 45 seconds, he said desperately. "You said Alpha Team could neutralize any threat in 45 seconds. Sarah looked at her watch. "From the moment you charged me to when you were on your knees? 12 seconds, your entire team? 30 seconds without throwing a single offensive strike. But you were right about one thing, Captain." She paused, letting him hang on her words. 45 seconds is all it takes to destroy someone's world. You just never imagined it would be your own. As Thompson was dragged away, Colonel Harrison addressed the assembled soldiers. "What you've witnessed today is classified, but the lesson is not. Major Mitchell, Dragon 7, endured months of abuse to expose corruption that was killing our own people. She became dead weight to drag the guilty into the light." Sarah stood in the center of the warehouse, the torn gray shirt and borrowed jacket a stark contrast to the power everyone now knew she possessed. The dragon might be hidden again, but no one would ever forget what they had seen. "There are 4 more bases," Sarah said quietly, but her voice carried to every corner of the warehouse. 4 more networks, and I'll become whatever I need to become to expose them all. A janitor, a cook, a secretary, it doesn't matter. The dragon can take any form. She looked around at the assembled soldiers, many still recording, still processing what they had witnessed. "Remember what you saw today. Not the dragon, not the combat skills, but the lesson about how you treat people. Every person you dismiss as beneath you, every person you mock as dead weight, might be carrying secrets you can't imagine, or they might be exactly what they appear, and still deserve your respect." With that, Major Sarah Mitchell, Dragon 7, the woman with the dragon tattoo that marked her as a legend, walked toward the warehouse door. The crowd parted respectfully, soldiers saluting as she passed. Emma Rodriguez ran after her. "Major Mitchell, will we see you again?" Sarah turned, and for the first time she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. Maybe not as Sarah Mitchell, but somewhere at another base, someone will be dismissed as dead weight. Someone will be mocked and pushed around, and one day, that someone will reveal a dragon. She pulled out a challenge coin from her pocket, worn and scratched, with a dragon wrapped around a sword on one side and the number 7 on the other. "Keep this," she said, pressing it into Emma's hand, "to remember that true strength often comes disguised as weakness, and that sometimes the dead weight you mock today becomes the storm that changes everything tomorrow." As she walked away, disappearing into the afternoon sun, the warehouse erupted in discussion. The legend of Dragon 7 would spread across every military installation within hours, but somewhere, at another base, a new identity was already being prepared. Another overlooked person ready to be dismissed as dead weight, ready to hide the dragon until the moment of revelation. The dragon tattoo might be covered now, but its message was clear. The most dangerous predator is the one that knows how to appear as prey, and Sarah Mitchell had mastered that art to perfection. 6 months from now, at Fort Raven, a quiet supply clerk named Janet Foster would start her first day. She would be small, unremarkable, easily dismissed. She would endure mockery and abuse with quiet patience, and she would be hiding a dragon, waiting for the perfect moment to rise. The rain hammered against the windows of the Greyhound bus as it pulled into Fort Raven's civilian terminal at 4:30 a.m. Among the handful of passengers disembarking was a woman who seemed designed to be forgotten. Janet Foster clutched a worn duffel bag, her mousy brown hair, a wig so perfect it fooled everyone, hung limp from the rain. She wore thick glasses that magnified her eyes to an almost comical degree, and her oversized raincoat made her look like a child playing dress-up. 6 months had passed since the dragon had revealed itself at Fort Thunder. 6 months since Captain Marcus Thompson's weapons smuggling ring had been exposed. The military world had been shaken by the revelation that Dragon 7 lived, and every base had tightened security, increased background checks, and sworn they would never be infiltrated. They were wrong. Fort Raven sprawled across 3,000 acres of Pacific Northwest wilderness, its frequent rain and persistent fog making it perfect for classified training operations. It was also, according to Sarah's intelligence, the hub of the second weapons network, bigger and more dangerous than Thompson's operation. Janet Foster shuffled toward the base's main gate, her sensible shoes squelching in puddles. The gate guards barely glanced at her credentials. Supply clerk, level 1 clearance, assigned to warehouse 7. Nothing interesting about Janet Foster. Nothing at all. "You're late," growled Master Sergeant Rick Daniels when she reported to the warehouse. He was everything Thompson had been, and worse. 6'4" of barely contained violence wrapped in army green. His shaved head gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his eyes held the kind of cruelty that enjoyed itself. "I'm sorry, Sergeant. The bus—" "I don't care about your excuses, Foster. You know what you are? You're a temporary fix for a permanent problem. 6 weeks. That's how long the last 3 supply clerks lasted before they couldn't handle it and quit. You'll probably last 4. Janet kept her eyes down, letting her shoulders hunch forward in the submissive posture that made people dismiss her instantly. "I'll do my best, Sergeant." Daniels laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Your best? Your best is worthless. Get to work. Martinez will show you the ropes, assuming you can understand basic instructions." Corporal Luis Martinez was younger than Daniels, but cut from the same cloth. He looked Janet up and down with obvious disdain. "Great. Another desktop warrior. Follow me, Foster, and try not to touch anything expensive." The warehouse was massive, row upon row of military equipment stretching into shadows, but Sarah's trained eye immediately caught what others would miss. Too much inventory for a base this size. Shipping containers with false manifests, security cameras with suspicious blind spots. "This is your station," Martinez said, pointing to a cluttered desk in a corner. "You process incoming shipments, update the database, and stay out of everyone's way. Think you can handle that without screwing up?" "Yes, sir." Martinez leaned in close, his coffee breath washing over her. "One more thing, Foster. This warehouse runs on a simple hierarchy. Daniels is God, I'm his prophet, and you're nothing. Less than nothing. You're the dirt we scrape off our boots. Clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." For the first 2 weeks, Janet Foster was the perfect victim. She arrived early, left late, and absorbed abuse with the patience of a saint. When Daniels accidentally knocked her lunch into the trash, she cleaned it up without complaint. When Martinez deleted 3 hours of her data entry as a lesson in backing up work, she simply started over. But while Janet Foster was being broken down, Sarah Mitchell was building intelligence. The warehouse operated on a schedule that didn't match official base activities. Trucks arrived at 3 a.m., always on Tuesdays and Fridays, always with drivers who weren't in the base's personnel database. Crates marked as training equipment were too heavy for their supposed contents, and Daniels had a satellite phone he thought no one knew about, which he used for encrypted calls every evening at 8:45. 3 weeks into her assignment, things escalated. "Foster!" Daniel's bellow echoed through the warehouse. "Get over here!" Janet hurried over, nearly tripping on her own feet in her apparent nervousness. A crate had been opened, revealing ammunition that wasn't supposed to exist, armor-piercing rounds specifically banned by international treaty. "You logged this wrong," Daniel snarled, though Janet knew she hadn't logged it at all. It had bypassed the entire system. "This kind of mistake could end your career." "I'm sorry, Sergeant. I don't understand." His hand shot out, grabbing her collar and slamming her against the crate hard enough to rattle her teeth. "You don't understand anything, do you? You're worthless, a waste of oxygen. The Army would be better off if people like you didn't exist." Janet let herself whimper, playing the role perfectly, but her hands had subtly positioned themselves in a way that could break his grip and his arm in less than 2 seconds if needed. "Please, Sergeant Daniels, I'm trying." "Trying isn't good enough." He shoved her to the ground, and Janet let herself fall, scraping her palms on the concrete. "Clean this mess up. And if you breathe a word about this inventory to anyone, you'll wish you'd never been born." As Janet scrambled to clean up papers that had scattered in her fall, she palmed one of the shipping manifests. The origin point was encrypted, but the destination was clear: a cartel safehouse in Mexico that had been responsible for the deaths of 3 DEA agents last month. That night, alone in her small off-base apartment, Sarah Mitchell emerged from the Janet Foster disguise. She uploaded the manifest to a secured server, adding it to the growing mountain of evidence. But something was different about Fort Raven's operation. It was bigger, more systematic, and had connections that went beyond military personnel. The breakthrough came in week 4 from an unexpected source. Private First Class Amy Chen was 19, fresh out of basic, and assigned to warehouse security. Unlike the others, she didn't participate in the daily humiliation of Janet Foster. She didn't defend her either, but Sarah noticed how Amy would sometimes leave a fresh cup of coffee on Janet's desk, or accidentally warn her when Daniels was in a particularly foul mood. One evening, as Janet worked late pretending to struggle with spreadsheets, Amy approached nervously. "Ms. Foster, you should go home. Things get different here after dark." Janet looked up, blinking owlishly behind her thick glasses. "Different how?" Amy glanced around, then leaned closer. "Just trust me. Leave by 7. Always." But Sarah had no intention of leaving. Instead, she activated the surveillance equipment she'd hidden throughout the warehouse. Devices so small they looked like dust motes, so sophisticated they could transmit through 3 feet of concrete. What she recorded that night changed everything. At exactly 8 p.m., 3 black SUVs arrived at the warehouse's loading dock. The men who emerged weren't military. They moved like private contractors, mercenaries. Leading them was someone Sarah recognized from intelligence files: Viktor Kozlov, former Spetsnaz, now running the largest weapons trafficking ring in Eastern Europe. Daniels greeted him like an old friend. "Viktor, everything's ready. 40 crates of M4s, 20 of the special ammunition, and those surface-to-air missiles you wanted." Kozlov's accent was thick as motor oil. "And the other matter? Tomorrow night. The demonstration you requested. Good. The buyers need to see American weapons in American hands killing American targets. It sends a message." Sarah's blood turned to ice. They were planning a false flag operation, using stolen U.S. weapons to attack U.S. personnel, then blaming it on foreign terrorists to justify military escalation. She needed to act fast, but her cover was too valuable to blow yet. She needed to know who the targets were, when the attack would happen, and who in the command structure was involved. The next morning, Janet Foster reported to work as usual, but Sarah Mitchell was preparing for war. "Foster," Martinez barked. "Daniels wants you in the loading bay, now." The loading bay had been cleared of its usual workers. Only Daniels, Martinez, and 5 other soldiers Sarah recognized as part of the smuggling operation were present. They formed a circle around her, and Sarah knew this was an execution formation. "We had an interesting discovery this morning," Daniels said conversationally. "Someone accessed the warehouse after hours last night. Security footage shows nothing, but our thermal sensors picked up a heat signature right at your desk." Janet let her eyes go wide with practiced fear. I left at 6:30, Sergeant. I always do." "Funny thing about thermal signatures," Daniels continued, pulling out a combat knife. "They're like fingerprints, and yours matches the one from last night." The circle tightened. Sarah calculated angles, distances, threat levels. 7 opponents, all armed, all trained. In the Janet Foster disguise, she couldn't reveal her capabilities without destroying months of work across all 5 bases. "Please," Janet whimpered. "I don't understand." Daniels grabbed her hair, yanking her head back and pressing the knife to her throat. "Drop the act. We know someone's been investigating us. Thompson's operation at Fort Thunder got blown by some undercover operative. You think we're stupid enough to let it happen here?" The blade pressed harder, drawing a thin line of blood. Sarah had a decision to make: maintain cover and possibly die, or reveal herself and lose the entire network. That's when the warehouse doors exploded inward. Not literally, they opened normally, but the force of presence that entered felt like an explosion. General Patricia Hayes, commander of Joint Forces Northwest, strode in with 30 military police officers. Her steel gray hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her expression could have frozen lava. "Stand down, Sergeant Daniels," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of 30 years of service. Daniels didn't move the knife. "General, this is an internal matter." "I said stand down." The general's voice cracked like thunder. "That's an order, soldier." Slowly, reluctantly, Daniels lowered the knife and released Janet's hair. She stumbled forward, and General Hayes personally steadied her. "Are you all right, Ms. Foster?" Janet nodded shakily, maintaining her cover even as her mind raced. How did Hayes know to intervene? Had her cover been blown? "Sergeant Daniels, Corporal Martinez, you're all under arrest for treason, weapons trafficking, and conspiracy to commit terrorism." As the MPs moved in, Daniels laughed bitterly. "You have no evidence." General Hayes smiled, and it was sharp as winter. "Actually, we have everything. 3 weeks of surveillance, recorded conversations, financial records. You see, Sergeant, you were right about one thing. There was an undercover operative investigating you." She turned to Amy Chen, who stepped forward and removed her private's insignia, revealing Captain's bars underneath. "Captain Amy Chen, Army Intelligence. I've been documenting your operation for 6 months." Sarah felt a moment of professional admiration. She hadn't detected Chen's cover, which meant the woman was exceptionally good at her job. As Daniels and his conspirators were led away in handcuffs, General Hayes approached Janet. "Ms. Foster, I apologize for what you've endured here. Captain Chen told me about the abuse you've faced. No one should have to experience that." Janet kept her disguise intact, stammering her thanks. But General Hayes leaned in closer and whispered something that made Sarah's blood run cold. "The dragon is not the only one who can hide, Major Mitchell." Sarah's eyes snapped us to the generals, and Hayes smiled. "Did you really think you were the only one playing this game? I've known who you were since day 2, but I needed you to draw them out, make them confident enough to bring Kozlov here. You used me as bait. I used a legendary operator who was already using herself as bait. The difference is, I made sure you had backup." Hayes gestured to Chen. "The captain's been watching your 6 since you arrived." Sarah felt a complex mix of anger and respect. She'd been outplayed, but in a way that had achieved her mission. How many others know? About Dragon 7 being alive? Officially no one. About Janet Foster being more than she seems? Just myself and Captain Chen. Your secret is safe, Major. There are still 3 more bases. Hayes nodded grimly. Fort Storm, Fort Lightning, and Fort Avalanche. We know. We also know you've already established covers at 2 of them. Then you know I need to finish this. I know you need to be careful. Kozlov escaped during the raid. He knows about the undercover operations now. The other bases will be on high alert. Sarah considered this. Her mission had just become exponentially more dangerous. "I need a week to close out Janet Foster properly," she said. "Then I moved to Fort Storm." General Hayes studied her for a long moment. "You know, when I heard the stories about Dragon 7, I thought they were exaggerated. A soldier who could become anyone, defeat anyone, survive anything. But watching you these past weeks, letting yourself be abused and humiliated while gathering intelligence, that takes a different kind of strength. It takes the kind of strength that wins wars, Sarah replied simply. 1 week later, Janet Foster submitted her resignation, citing stress and inability to handle the demanding environment. Daniels' replacement barely glanced at the paperwork. Supply clerks came and went. No one remembered them for long. Fort Storm was located in the Arizona desert, a sprawling complex dedicated to advanced weapons testing. The base prided itself on its security, biometric scanners at every checkpoint, surveillance systems that covered every inch of ground, and a culture of paranoia that made trust impossible. Lisa Anderson, data analyst, had been working there for 2 months already. She was everything Janet Foster hadn't been: confident, competent, almost aggressively ordinary. Where Janet had absorbed abuse, Lisa deflected it with bureaucratic efficiency. She was the kind of person who existed in every office, unremarkable but essential. The operation at Fort Storm was different from the others. Instead of smuggling weapons out, they were bringing weapons in, foreign military hardware that was being reverse-engineered and sold to private military contractors. The base commander, Colonel Frank Morrison, was the kingpin of an operation that generated millions in black market sales. But Morrison was paranoid after Fort Thunder and Fort Raven. He had instituted new security protocols, including weekly polygraph tests for all personnel with access to sensitive areas. Sarah had beaten polygraphs before, but doing so while maintaining a perfect cover identity was exhausting. Every week, she sat in that chair, sensors attached to her skin, and lied with the steadiness of truth. "Is your name Lisa Anderson?" "Yes." The machine showed no deception. "Have you ever served in the military?" "No." Still nothing. "Have you ever been involved in espionage activities?" "No." The needle remained steady. What the polygraph couldn't detect was that Sarah had learned to control her physiological responses so completely that her lies registered as baseline normal. It was a skill that had taken years to master and came with a cost, crushing headaches that left her vomiting in her apartment bathroom each night. The breakthrough at Fort Storm came through tragedy. Specialist Michael Torres was 22, engaged to be married, and 3 weeks from finishing his service. He'd noticed discrepancies in inventory reports and made the mistake of reporting them through official channels. They found his body in the desert, apparent victim of a training accident. But Sarah had seen the fear in his eyes the day before, heard his whispered phone call to his fiancée about something big and wrong. That night, Lisa Anderson did something Janet Foster never would have done. She broke into Colonel Morrison's office. The dragon might hide, but it never forgot how to hunt. Morrison's files were encrypted, but Sarah had come prepared with military-grade decryption software, loaded onto a device no bigger than a thumb drive. As the files unlocked, she discovered the full scope of the operation. It wasn't just weapons trafficking. It was treason on a scale that defied comprehension. Morrison and his network were selling American military secrets, troop movements, defense protocols, classified technology, to the highest bidder. The weapons were just a side business. The real money came from intelligence that had cost hundreds of American lives in operations gone wrong because the enemy knew they were coming. Sarah was photographing documents when she heard footsteps in the corridor. Not the measured pace of a security patrol, but the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly where they were going. She had seconds to decide: hide and risk being trapped, or confront and risk exposure. The door opened before she could choose. Colonel Morrison stood in the doorway, backed by corridor lighting. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of all-American looks that belonged on recruitment posters. His hand rested on his sidearm, but he hadn't drawn it yet. "Ms. Anderson, working late?" Sarah turned slowly, letting him see her hands were empty. "Colonel Morrison, I could ask you the same thing. This is my office, and these are classified documents that prove you're a traitor." Morrison stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You know, when they told me about Fort Thunder, about the legendary Dragon 7, I didn't believe it. A ghost story, I thought. But then Fort Raven fell, and I knew. Someone was hunting us." Sarah said nothing, calculating distances and angles. "The question is," Morrison continued, "are you Dragon 7, or are you just another investigator trying to be a hero? Does it matter?" "Actually, yes." Morrison pulled out his phone, showing her a video feed. It was her apartment, where 3 men in black were waiting. If you're Dragon 7, those men are there to capture you alive. Kozlov has a buyer who will pay $50 million for the legendary operative. If you're just Lisa Anderson, they're there to kill you and dissolve your body in acid. Sarah's expression didn't change. And if I'm neither? Morrison frowned. What do you mean? I mean, Sarah said quietly, what if Dragon 7 really did die in Syria? What if the story of her survival is just that? A story? What if there's something else entirely hunting you? For the first time, Morrison looked uncertain. Sarah continued, her voice taking on an edge. You've been so focused on finding Dragon 7 that you never considered the alternative, that the Dragon unit didn't die in Syria, that all 7 of us survived, that we've been hunting you from 7 different angles. Morrison's face paled. That's impossible. The bodies you were shown, the DNA you were given, all of it can be faked if you have the right resources. And the Dragon unit? We had resources you can't imagine. She stood slowly, and Morrison backed up a step. Right now, Dragon 3 is at Fort Lightning, documenting your superior's involvement. Dragon 5 is at Fort Avalanche, recording every transaction. Dragon 2, 4, and 6, they're already in position at locations you don't even know are compromised yet. You're lying. Sarah pulled out her phone, typing a quick message. Within seconds, Morrison's phone buzzed. Then his computer chimed. Then the landline rang. Different numbers, different area codes. But when he checked his phone, the message was the same. The dragons have risen. Morrison's hand went to his gun, but Sarah was already moving. Not with the explosive violence of combat, but with the inevitable approach of a predator that knew its prey was cornered. You can shoot me, she said calmly, but that won't stop the others. In fact, it will accelerate their timeline. Within 6 hours, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence will be released simultaneously to military intelligence, the FBI, the CIA, the media. Your network will burn, and you'll burn with it. Morrison's hand trembled on his weapon. What do you want? Everything. Names, locations, contacts. Every person involved in your treason. And you're going to give it to me voluntarily, publicly, on record. Why would I do that? Because it's the only way you might live to see trial instead of dying in a training accident like Specialist Torres. Morrison's eyes widened. He hadn't expected her to know about Torres. Oh yes, Sarah continued. We know about every murder you've disguised as an accident. Every soldier who asked too many questions. Every investigator who got too close. But here's the thing about killing good people. Their ghosts have a way of coming back. She moved closer, and Morrison found himself backing against his own desk. Right now, Torres's fiancée is being briefed by military intelligence. She's being shown evidence that her future husband was murdered. She's being told that you ordered his death. How long do you think it takes for that kind of grief to turn into rage? How long before she tells his unit brothers? How long before you have 100 soldiers who want justice? Morrison's composure finally cracked. You're Dragon 7. You have to be. Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Does it matter? Whether I'm Dragon 7 or Dragon 3 or just Lisa Anderson who got lucky, the result is the same. Your empire is falling, Colonel. The only question is whether you fall with it or try to grab a parachute on the way down. That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. Alarms began blaring. Morrison's phone lit up with messages. The base was under attack. What did you do? He demanded. Nothing, Sarah replied truthfully. But Kozlov, he doesn't like loose ends. The window behind Morrison exploded inward as a sniper's bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Sarah was already moving, combat instincts overriding cover identity. She rolled behind the desk as more bullets shredded the air where she'd been standing. Morrison was screaming, clutching his shoulder. Sarah could have left him to die, but that wasn't who she was. She grabbed his collar and dragged him to cover as the office was torn apart by automatic weapons fire. They're cleaning house, she said, applying pressure to his wound with practiced efficiency. You, me, anyone who could testify against them. Kozlov learned from Fort Thunder and Fort Raven. No survivors, no trials, no exposure. Help me, Morrison gasped. Please. Sarah looked at him, this traitor who'd caused so many deaths, and made a choice that defined the difference between justice and vengeance. I'll help you, But you're going to tell them everything. Every name, every crime, every drop of blood on your hands. Morrison nodded frantically. Yes, anything. Just... The door exploded off its hinges. 3 mercenaries in full tactical gear entered, weapons raised. Sarah had a split second to decide: maintain her cover as Lisa Anderson and die, or reveal her capabilities and complete her mission. The dragon made the choice for her. She moved like liquid mercury, using Morrison's desk as a launching point. Her foot connected with the first mercenary's jaw, snapping his head back. Before his body hit the ground, she'd stripped his weapon and put 2 rounds into the second attacker's center mass. The third managed to get a shot off, the bullet grazing her ribs, before she closed the distance and applied a chokehold that put him down in 4 seconds. Morrison stared at her in shock. You really are? Shut up and move! Sarah hauled him to his feet, ignoring the burning pain in her side. We need to get to the command center. They fought their way through corridors filled with smoke and gunfire. Fort Storm was in chaos. Kozlov's mercenaries were systematically eliminating everyone connected to the smuggling operation while trying to destroy evidence. But they hadn't counted on Sarah Mitchell. She moved through the violence with terrifying efficiency, protecting Morrison not out of compassion but necessity. He was evidence, a living confession that could bring down the entire network. They reached the command center to find it under siege. Captain Amy Chen, apparently reassigned after Fort Raven, was leading the defense with a handful of loyal soldiers. Major Mitchell, Chen called out, no longer bothering with cover identities. About time you showed up. Sarah pushed Morrison toward Chen. Keep him alive. He's going to testify. Where are you going? Sarah checked her appropriated weapon. Kozlov's here. This ends tonight. She found him in the warehouse, exactly where she knew he'd be. The Russian was supervising the loading of weapons into trucks, preparing to disappear with millions in military hardware. Viktor Kozlov, she called out. Stepping from the shadows, he turned slowly, unsurprised. Dragon 7, I wondered when you would stop hiding. I never hid. I just waited. Kozlov smiled, his scarred face twisting. You know, in Russia, we have stories about dragons too. But in our stories, the dragon always dies in his... in the end. This isn't a Russian story. They moved simultaneously, years of training compressed into seconds of violence. Kozlov was good, Spetsnaz training combined with years of real combat. But Sarah had been forged in a different fire, trained by the best to be better. The fight was brutal, efficient, and brief. When it ended, Kozlov was on his knees, blood streaming from a dozen wounds, Sarah's pistol pressed to his forehead. You killed my unit in Syria, she said quietly. Kozlov laughed, spitting blood. No, that wasn't me. That was your own people. Americans betraying Americans. I was just the weapon they hired. Names? Dead men tell no tales, dragon, but living men? He grinned through bloody teeth. I'll give you everything for immunity. Sarah considered for a moment, then lowered the weapon. Deal. The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Morrison and Kozlov's testimonies revealed a network that went all the way to the Pentagon. 17 high-ranking officers were arrested. Hundreds of millions in stolen weapons were recovered. The false flag operation was prevented, saving countless lives. Fort Lightning and Fort Avalanche fell within days, their operations exposed by evidence Sarah had been gathering for months. The entire weapons trafficking network collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. 3 weeks later, Sarah Mitchell stood in a conference room deep in the Pentagon, facing a panel of generals, admirals, and intelligence directors. General Hayes was there, along with several faces she didn't recognize. Major Mitchell, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs began, your actions have exposed the largest corruption network in military history. You've saved hundreds of lives and recovered billions in stolen assets. The question now is, what do we do with you? Sarah remained at attention. Sir? Dragon 7 is supposed to be dead. Sarah Mitchell doesn't officially exist. You've been operating outside any legal framework for over 3 years. By rights, we should court-martial you. I understand, sir. But, he continued, we'd be fools to waste an asset like you, which is why we're offering you a choice. General Hayes stepped forward with a black folder. Option 1, full reinstatement, public recognition, medals, and command of a new unit designed to prevent future corruption. Option 2, Sarah asked, You remain dead. Dragon 7 becomes a myth, but we fund you, support you, and point you at problems that need solving outside official channels. Sarah didn't hesitate. Option 2. The chairman nodded, as if he had expected that answer. Very well, Dragon 7 remains KIA, but if you ever need anything, I'll manage, sir. I always have. As she turned to leave, General Hayes called out, Mitchell, the dragon tattoo, is the story true? 7 stars for 7 impossible operations? Sarah paused at the door. Actually, General, it's 8 stars now. I had one added after Fort Thunder. She left them with that, walking out of the Pentagon and effectively out of existence. Sarah Mitchell was dead. Dragon 7 was a legend. But somewhere, a woman with many names and many faces was already preparing for the next mission. 6 months later, at a small military cemetery in Virginia, a woman in civilian clothes placed flowers on 7 graves. The headstones bore the names of Dragon Unit members, all marked KIA, Syria, 2019. We got them, she whispered to the stones. Every last one. A movement in her peripheral vision made her turn. 6 figures emerged from behind various monuments, moving with the fluid grace of predators. As they approached, Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon, then stopped. She knew those faces. Dragon 2, supposed dead from an IED. Dragon 3, allegedly executed by insurgents. Dragon 4, 5, and 6 all confirmed KIA in the Syria ambush. They stood before her, very much alive, bearing scars, but breathing. Hello, 7, Dragon 2 said, his voice exactly as she remembered. Been a while. Sarah's mind raced, recalculating everything she thought she knew. You're dead. I saw the bodies. You carried what we needed you to carry, Dragon 3 interrupted gently. Bodies that would pass DNA tests because they were cloned tissue. Documents that would satisfy investigators because we wrote them. A story that would hold up because you believed it. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Dragon 4 stepped forward. The corruption went too deep. We couldn't fight it from within. So, we died, became myths, and started hunting from the shadows. You were the only one we kept in the light, the only one who could operate in both worlds. You used me. We guided you, Dragon 2 corrected. Every base you infiltrated, we fed you intelligence. Every identity you assumed, we provided support. You were never alone, 7. You were just the visible tip of the spear. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, reality reconstructing itself. The mercenaries, the attacks, Kozlov, all real, Dragon 5 confirmed. But we made sure you were always in the right place at the right time. Made sure you had what you needed to survive and succeed. The question now, Dragon 6 said quietly, is what comes next? Sarah looked at her unit, her family. BCC. Her family, the ghosts she'd mourned for 3 years. They were different now, harder, scarred, transformed by their time in the shadows, but they were alive. There are more networks, she said finally. More corruption, more threats. Dragon 2 smiled. 17 that we've identified so far. International reach, billions in black money, thousands of lives at stake. 7 dragons against all that? 7 dragons who the world thinks are dead, Dragon 3 pointed out. 7 ghosts who can be anywhere, anyone. 7 soldiers who've already proven that the impossible is just another mission. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years, belonging. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. When do we start? She asked. We already have, Dragon 2 replied, pulling out a tablet showing surveillance footage from around the world. Dragon 4 is embedded in a cartel in Colombia. Dragon 5 is tracking weapons in Somalia. Dragon 6 is infiltrating a terrorist cell in Pakistan. And you? Coordinating, planning, making sure our dragons have what they need. He looked at her directly. You're our best operator, 7, but you're also our symbol. The dragon that everyone knows about, everyone fears. While they watch for you, we strike from the shadows. Sarah nodded slowly. It made sense in a way that her exhausted mind could barely process. So, Dragon 7 stays dead? Dragon 7 is whatever we need her to be, Dragon 2 said. Dead, alive, myth, reality. That's the power of the dragon. It can take any form. They spent the next hour briefing her on the full scope of their operations. It was staggering. A private intelligence network that spanned the globe, funded by recovered criminal assets, staffed by people who officially didn't exist. They were judge, jury, and sometimes executioner for crimes that legal systems couldn't touch. As dawn broke over the cemetery, the dragons began to disperse. Each had their own mission, their own identity to return to. But before they left, they performed one final ritual. Each dragon pulled out a knife and made a small cut on their palm, letting a drop of blood fall on each grave marker, a blood oath to the lie that gave them freedom, to the death that gave them life. Sarah was the last to leave. She stood among the headstones, processing everything she'd learned. 3 years of grief transformed into understanding. 3 years of solitude revealed as an illusion. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but she recognized the code. New mission, new identity, new target. She looked at the grave marked Major Sarah Mitchell, Dragon 7, KIA, Syria, 20, and smiled. The woman buried there had been a soldier, bound by rules and regulations. The woman standing here was something more, a force of nature, unbound by law or limitation. As she walked away from the cemetery, Sarah's fingers unconsciously traced the dragon tattoo through her shirt. 8 stars for 8 operations. But there was room for more stars, more victories, more justice delivered from the shadows. 3 days later, Maria Santos, janitor at Fort Avalanche, reported for her first day of work. She was small, unremarkable, easy to ignore. She pushed her cleaning cart through corridors of power, invisible to the people making deals that would cost lives. But Maria Santos was patient. She could wait. She could watch. She could gather evidence that would bring down another network of corruption. And when the time came, when the guilty felt safest, the dragon would rise again. The cycle continued, would always continue, because evil never rested, corruption never ceased, and somewhere in the shadows, 7 dragons waited to strike. The commanding officer at Fort Avalanche, Brigadier General Thomas White, was a cautious man. After the falls of Fort Thunder, Raven, Storm, and Lightning, he'd instituted security measures that bordered on paranoia. Every employee, down to the janitors, underwent extensive background checks. Security cameras covered every inch of the base. Random polygraph tests were administered weekly. But Maria Santos passed them all. Her background was impeccable. 15 years of janitorial work at various military installations, all with glowing recommendations. The polygraph tests showed no deception when she claimed to be a simple cleaning woman trying to make ends meet. The security cameras captured nothing but a middle-aged woman slowly pushing her cart, emptying trash bins, mopping floors. General White never suspected that the woman cleaning his office was memorizing every document on his desk. He didn't know that the cleaning supplies in her cart concealed sophisticated surveillance equipment. He couldn't imagine that the hunched, arthritic janitor who struggled with heavy trash bags could eliminate his entire security detail in under 30 seconds if necessary. Maria Santos was a ghost hiding in plain sight, and she was hunting. The operation at Fort Avalanche was different from the others. This wasn't about weapons or intelligence. It was about people. The base was a hub for human trafficking, using military transport to move victims across borders under the guise of troop movements. Young women and children, kidnapped from war zones, were being sold to the highest bidders. Sarah had discovered this horror in her second week when she'd found a locked room that wasn't on any building schematic. The muffled sounds from inside, crying, pleading in various languages, had nearly broken her cover as rage consumed her. But rage without purpose was useless. She needed evidence, names, proof that would destroy not just the operation, but everyone connected to it. General White was the centerpiece, but he was protected by layers of subordinates who did the dirty work. Captain Mark Stevens handled transportation. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Banks managed the inventory. Master Sergeant Joel Cooper recruited the security team, mercenaries who enjoyed their work too much. Sarah documented everything, every transaction, every movement, every victim. Her dragon sisters and brothers fed her intelligence from their positions. Transportation routes from Dragon 4, financial records from Dragon 5, buyer information from Dragon 6. But knowing and proving were different things, and saving the victims without alerting the network would be nearly impossible. That's when Sarah decided to break protocol. She made contact with someone outside the Dragon network, FBI Special Agent Diana Foster, who had been investigating human trafficking for a decade. The agent was clean, dedicated, and most importantly, willing to work outside official channels when necessary. They met at a truck stop 50 miles from base. Two women who looked nothing alike but shared the same burning need for justice. You're asking me to believe you're part of a secret network of dead soldiers who fight corruption, Foster said during her coffee. Sarah said nothing, simply rolling up her sleeve to reveal part of the dragon tattoo. Foster's eyes widened. Dragon 7, you're Dragon 7, but you're supposed to be dead. Yes, it's useful being dead. People tend to speak freely around ghosts. Sarah laid out the evidence she'd gathered. Photos, documents, recorded conversations. Foster's face grew paler with each revelation. How many victims are we talking about? Currently at Fort Avalanche, 43. But based on the records, they've moved over 300 in the past 2 years. Foster's hand trembled as she set down her coffee cup. We need to move now. No. Moving now saves 43 but alerts the network. They'll scatter, destroy evidence, kill witnesses. We need to hit them all simultaneously. How many locations? 17. Across 6 countries. Foster stared at her. That's impossible. The coordination alone would take 7 dragons, properly positioned, with the right support. Sarah pulled out an encrypted phone. Make the call. Get your task force ready. 72 hours from now, at exactly 0300 hours Zulu time, we strike everywhere at once. The 3 days that followed were a masterclass in patience. Sarah continued her janitorial duties, watching General White and his conspirators finalize plans for their largest shipment yet, 60 victims to be moved during a supposed training exercise. She cleaned their offices while they discussed prices. She mopped their floors while they selected victims from photos like they were ordering from a catalog. She emptied their trash while they laughed about what happened to the merchandise that didn't sell. Every moment was agony, knowing that 43 people were suffering just buildings away. But premature action would doom hundreds more. On the final night, Sarah was cleaning General White's office when he entered unexpectedly. He was drunk, celebrating the upcoming payday from his largest transaction yet. Still here, Santos? He slurred, loosening his tie. Don't you have a home to go to? Just finishing up, General, Maria replied in accented English. White collapsed in his chair, staring at her with unfocused eyes. You know what I love about people like you, Santos? You're invisible. You see everything but understand nothing. You could walk through a crime scene and never realize it. Sarah continued mopping, her grip on the handle the only sign of her control. Yes, sir. Take this base, White continued, gesturing broadly. You've cleaned every building, every room, but you have no idea what really happens here. The power, the money, the absolute control over life and death. I just clean, General. White laughed. Exactly, you just clean. While I run an empire worth millions, while I decide who lives, who dies, who disappears forever. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. I am God here, Santos. And you're not even dust. Sarah stopped mopping and looked directly at him. For just a moment, she let him see what was behind Maria Santos's eyes. The dragon, coiled and ready to strike. White's laughter died. Something primal in his brain recognized the predator standing before him. His hand moved toward his sidearm. 0300 hours, Sarah said quietly. White frowned, his drunk mind trying to process. What? That's when the lights went out. The base erupted in chaos. Explosions at the motor pool, gunfire at the main gate, alarms blaring from every building. White grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. The landlines were dead. His computer screen showed only static. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the office in red. White stood, drawing his pistol, only to find Maria Santos gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. The hunched posture was gone, replaced by perfect military bearing. The servile expression had transformed into something that made White's blood freeze. General Thomas White, Sarah said, her accented English replaced by clear, precise diction. You're under arrest for human trafficking, murder, and crimes against humanity. White raised his weapon, but Sarah was already moving. The mop handle, reinforced with carbon fiber hidden beneath worn wood, struck his wrist with surgical precision. The pistol flew across the room. Before he could scream, she had him in a chokehold that compressed his carotid arteries without crushing his windpipe. You're going to live, she whispered in his ear as consciousness faded. You're going to stand trial. You're going to face every family of every victim. And then you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell so small, you'll remember what it felt like to be powerless. White went limp. Sarah zip-tied his hands and feet, then activated her communication device. Dragon 7 to all units, package secured. The responses came in rapid succession. Dragon 2 confirms, Bangkok location neutralized. Dragon 3 confirms, Berlin targets in custody. Dragon 4 confirms, Bogota network eliminated. Dragon 5 confirms, Cairo operation successful. Dragon 6 confirms, Mumbai ring destroyed. 17 locations, hundreds of traffickers, all taken down in synchronized strikes that had been coordinated across time zones, languages, and jurisdictions. FBI teams swarmed Fort Avalanche, guided by Sarah's intelligence to every hidden room, every victim, every piece of evidence. The 43 victims were rescued, traumatized, but alive. Medical teams were standing by, counselors ready to begin the long process of healing. As dawn broke over Fort Avalanche, Sarah stood on the roof of the command building, watching helicopters evacuate the victims to safety. Each one represented a life saved, a family reunited, a future restored. Agent Foster found her there. "We got them all, every single one." Sarah nodded, but her eyes remained on the helicopters. "The ones we know about. You think there are more?" "There are always more." Sarah turned to face Foster. "Evil doesn't sleep. It just changes faces, finds new shadows to hide in." "So, what now? You disappear again, become someone else?" Sarah pulled out a phone, showing Foster a message she'd just received. Another base, another identity, another evil to hunt. "Now I become whoever I need to be to stop the next one." Foster studied her for a long moment. It must be lonely, being dead. Sarah thought about her dragon brothers and sisters, scattered across the globe, but always connected. Thought about the victims they'd saved, the justice they'd delivered. "Actually," she said, "death is surprisingly full of life." She turned to leave, but Foster called out one more time. "Will I see you again?" Sarah paused at the door. "You'll see Maria Santos's janitor uniform in evidence lockup. You'll see reports about the mysterious operative who helped take down the trafficking ring. But me?" She smiled. "I'm already gone." 6 weeks later, Susan Williams, accountant, reported for her first day at Fort Tempest. She was middle-aged, recently divorced, desperately needing the job. Her shoulders were hunched from years of bending over ledgers. Her eyes were weak from staring at computer screens. She spoke in a nervous whisper that made people immediately dismiss her as harmless. No one suspected that Susan Williams was mapping their financial crimes. No one noticed that her trembling hands were photographing classified documents. No one imagined that the nervous accountant who apologized for everything was actually deciding their fates. The dragon had taken a new form, but its purpose remained unchanged. And somewhere, 6 other dragons were doing the same thing. 7 ghosts waging war against corruption, invisible until the moment they struck. The cemetery in Virginia remained peaceful. 7 headstones standing in perfect formation, marking the graves of soldiers who had supposedly died in Syria. Visitors sometimes left flowers, small American flags, tokens of respect for the fallen. They had no idea they were honoring empty graves, paying respects to ghosts who walked among them. On the first anniversary of the Fort Avalanche operation, something unusual happened. 7 figures appeared at the cemetery at midnight, each approaching from a different direction. They moved like shadows, invisible to the security cameras that monitored the grounds. They stood in a circle around the 7 headstones, each wearing different faces, different identities, but united in purpose. "Status report," Dragon 2 said quietly. One by one, they shared their accomplishments. Trafficking rings destroyed, weapon networks eliminated, corrupt officials exposed, hundreds of lives saved. "And losses?" Dragon 2 asked. Dragon 4 took a bullet in Colombia, recovered. Dragon 6 exposed in Mumbai, had to eliminate that identity. Dragon 7, Sarah paused. "I'm running out of faces to wear." Dragon 3 stepped forward. "Then perhaps it's time for Dragon 7 to truly die." Sarah looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean? You've been the visible dragon for 4 years, the one they look for, hunt for, fear. But that attention is becoming a liability. They're starting to pattern your methods, predict your appearances." Dragon 2 nodded. "We've discussed this. It's time for Dragon 7 to become myth completely, and for Sarah Mitchell to find a different kind of life. I can't stop. There's too much work." "There will always be work," Dragon 5 interrupted. "But you've carried the heaviest burden. You've been the face of our while we hid completely. It's time for that to change. Dragon 6 pulled out a document. New identity, complete background, military pension under an alias. A life where you can rest, heal, maybe even find peace. Sarah stared at the document. Rebecca Thompson, retired teacher, a small house in Maine, a life so ordinary it was invisible. And the mission? Continues, Dragon 2 assured her, but with 6 dragons instead of 7. Or perhaps, he pulled out another set of documents. With new dragons, we've identified candidates, people like us, betrayed by the system, officially dead, hungry for justice. Sarah looked around the circle at these people who had been her family, her purpose, her identity for so long. I don't know how to be normal, she admitted. Then learn, Dragon 3 said gently. The same way you learn to be Janet Foster and Lisa Anderson and Maria Santos. Except this time, you're not hunting, you're living. It was an order disguised as a gift. Sarah understood that her effectiveness was compromised. She'd become too known, too hunted. The dragon needed to disappear completely for the mission to continue. One more operation, she negotiated. Let me finish what I started at Fort Tempest. Dragon 2 considered, then nodded. One more. Then Dragon 7 joins her brothers and sisters in the grave permanently. They performed the blood ritual one final time, each drop a promise to continue the fight. Then they dispersed, melting back into their cover identities, their shadow lives. Sarah remained, staring at her own headstone. Major Sarah Mitchell, Dragon 7, KIA, Syria 20. Soon, that would be the complete truth. Dragon 7 would be dead, but Rebecca Thompson would live, carrying the memories and scars of a war that never ended. The Fort Tempest operation was supposed to be routine. Susan Williams had discovered a money laundering operation that funded terrorist cells worldwide. The evidence was solid, the targets identified, the strike teams ready, but something went wrong. General White, from his prison cell, had managed to send one last message to his network, a warning that the dragons were real, that they walked among them, that anyone could be one of them. Fort Tempest went into lockdown. Every employee was quarantined, investigated, polygraphed. They were looking for the dragon, and they were willing to kill everyone to find her. Sarah maintained her cover for 3 days of interrogation, but on the 4th day, they brought in someone she didn't expect. Victor Kozlov, supposedly in federal custody, but standing there in Fort Tempest's interrogation room, very much free. "Hello, Dragon," he said, smiling. "I've been looking forward to this reunion." The interrogator, Colonel Pierce, looked confused. "You know Susan Williams?" Kozlov laughed. "Susan Williams doesn't exist. Neither does Janet Foster or Lisa Anderson or Maria Santos. They're all faces worn by the same ghost." He leaned forward. "Show them, Dragon. Show them what you really are." Sarah remained in character, letting Susan Williams's nervousness show. "I don't understand. Who is this man?" Kozlov pulled out a tablet, showing security footage from Fort Thunder. The moment the dragon tattoo was revealed, Thompson's shock, the legend confirming itself. "This," Kozlov said, "is Dragon 7, and she's sitting right there, pretending to be a frightened accountant." Colonel Pierce studied the footage, then looked at Sarah. "Remove your shirt." What? That's inappropriate. "Remove your shirt, or I'll have it removed." Sarah calculated odds. 5 guards in the room, Kozlov armed, Pierce armed, cameras recording everything. No backup coming, because officially she didn't exist. Slowly, maintaining Susan's trembling fear, she unbuttoned her blouse. There was no tattoo. Her back was unmarked, bearing only the scars of supposed childhood accidents and middle-aged clumsiness. Kozlov's eyes widened. "That's impossible. You saw what we wanted you to see," Sarah said, but her voice had changed. Susan Williams was gone. The tattoo was temporary. High-grade theatrical ink designed to last just long enough to sell the legend. Dragon 7 never existed. She was a construct, a myth we created to distract you while the real work happened. Pierce looked between them, confused. "Then who are you?" Sarah smiled. "I'm nobody, a ghost of a ghost. One of hundreds of operatives you'll never identify because we don't exist in any system, any database, any reality you can access." She moved then, not with the explosive violence they expected, but with something more subtle. A small device hidden in her palm, pressed against the table. The electromagnetic pulse was localized, but powerful enough to destroy every electronic device in the room. Cameras died, lights failed, electronic locks disengaged. In the darkness that followed, Sarah became what she'd always been: invisible death. When backup arrived 40 seconds later, they found Pierce and his guards unconscious, professionally neutralized without permanent damage. Kozlov was gone, though they'd find him 3 hours later, tied to the base's flagpole with a note pinned to his chest. The dragons are everywhere. Sarah Mitchell had vanished, but not before uploading terabytes of evidence to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency in the country. Fort Tempest's money laundering operation was exposed completely, its perpetrators arrested within hours. 3 months later, Rebecca Thompson moved into a small house in Castine, Maine. She was a retired teacher, recently relocated from Arizona for the climate. Her neighbors found her pleasant if reserved. She joined a book club, volunteered at the local library, and tended a small garden that never quite thrived. No one suspected that she woke at 3 a.m. each night, combat nightmares leaving her sheets soaked with sweat. No one knew that she'd mapped 17 escape routes from her house within the first week. No one noticed that she never sat with her back to a door, never let anyone get too close, never fully relaxed. But slowly, incrementally, Rebecca Thompson began to become real. The book club became actual enjoyment of literature. The garden improved as she learned to nurture rather than survive. The nightmares came less frequently, replaced sometimes by dreams of dragons flying free. She received postcards occasionally. No return address, no signature, just images from around the world. A temple in Thailand, mountains in Colombia, desert in Somalia, each one meaning another operation completed, another wrong righted. The dragons were still flying, still hunting. They just flew without her now. On the second anniversary of her retirement, Rebecca was working in her garden when a young woman approached, military bearing despite civilian clothes, eyes that had seen too much for her age. "Ms. Thompson?" Rebecca didn't look up from her tomatoes. "Yes, I'm Captain Jessica Chen, Amy Chen's younger sister." Now Rebecca looked up, studying the young woman's face. The resemblance was there, subtle but unmistakable. Amy's never mentioned a sister. She never mentioned Dragon 7 either, until recently. Jessica knelt beside the garden, lowering her voice. "She told me if I ever needed help, real help, to find Rebecca Thompson in Castine. Amy was mistaken. I'm just a retired teacher. My unit was ambushed in Somalia, betrayed by our commanding officer. 7 dead. I'm the only survivor, and officially, I'm dead too." Rebecca's hand stilled on the plant she was tending. Jessica continued. "They're selling military intelligence to terrorist cells. I have evidence, but no one to trust. Amy said you'd know what to do." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, feeling the weight of decision. She'd promised to stay dead, to let Dragon 7 remain a myth. But looking at this young soldier, seeing her own past reflected in those haunted eyes, she knew the choice was already made. "Come inside," Rebecca said finally. "We need to make some calls." Within 6 hours, Jessica Chen had a new identity, a new mission, and contact with 6 dragons she'd never known existed. The network expanded, evolved, continued its work. Rebecca Thompson returned to her garden, to her book club, to her quiet life in Maine, but now she served a different purpose, not as a dragon herself, but as a gateway. A recruiter for those who had been betrayed, abandoned, left for dead by the system they'd served. Over the following months, others came. Soldiers who'd discovered corruption and been silenced. Intelligence operatives burned by their agencies. Law enforcement officers who'd gotten too close to the truth. Rebecca evaluated them, tested them, and occasionally, very carefully, introduced them to the Dragon Network. The 7 dragons had become 70, then 700. An invisible army of ghosts waging war against corruption wherever it festered. The legend of Dragon 7 grew with each operation, even though Sarah Mitchell never took the field again. The story became more elaborate with each telling. The invincible operative who could become anyone, defeat anyone, survive anything. And in her small house in Maine, Rebecca Thompson smiled whenever she heard a new version of the legend. They'd created something that transcended any individual, a symbol that evil would always be hunted, that corruption would never be safe, that somewhere in the shadows, dragons waited to strike. 5 years after her retirement, Rebecca received a different kind of postcard. Not a scenic view, but a photograph of 7 empty graves in Virginia. The headstones had been removed, the ground leveled, grass grown over the spots where the false graves had been. On the back, in Dragon 2's handwriting, "Even myths must evolve. The 7 are now truly dead. Long live the 7,000. Rebecca burned the postcard, scattering the ashes in her garden where they mixed with the soil. That night, she slept without nightmares for the first time since Syria. The war continued, would always continue, but she'd played her part, worn her faces, carried her burden. Now others carried the fight forward, each one a dragon in their own right, each one invisible until the moment they revealed their true nature. In her final years, Rebecca Thompson became genuinely happy. The teacher identity she'd adopted as cover became her truth. She tutored local children, helped military veterans with their education benefits, and quietly guided those who needed guidance. She never spoke of Dragon 7, never revealed the legend she had helped create and embody. That story belonged to the shadows now, to the next generation of dragons who would rise when needed. When Rebecca Thompson died peacefully in her sleep at age 73, her funeral was small. A few neighbors, some students she'd tutored, a handful of veterans she'd helped. They spoke of her kindness, her patience, her quiet strength. No one mentioned that calls had come from around the world that day, voices speaking in codes that meant dragons were mourning. No one noticed the 7 people scattered through the cemetery who didn't approach the grave but stood watch from a distance. And no one saw the figure who came that night, after everyone had gone. Amy Chen, now a general, placed a single dragon scale carved from black stone on the fresh grave. "Rest easy, 7, she whispered. "We've got the watch now." The dragon had finally found peace, but its legend would live forever. In military bases around the world, corrupt officers checked shadows nervously, wondering if the person they had dismissed as worthless might be something more. The story of Dragon 7 became required reading at certain levels of military intelligence, a cautionary tale about the danger of underestimating anyone. But more than that, it became inspiration for those who fought corruption from within, proof that one person, properly motivated and positioned, could bring down empires. And somewhere, in a dozen countries, in 100 different faces, new dragons rose from the ashes of the old. They were janitors and clerks, cooks and drivers, people so ordinary they were invisible, until they weren't. Until the moment came to reveal what they truly were. Until the dragon rose again, as it always would, as it always must. Because evil never rests, neither do dragons. The cycle was eternal, the war unending. But in that small cemetery in Maine, beneath a headstone that read simply, "Rebecca Thompson, teacher, friend," one dragon had finally found rest. Her war was over. She'd earned her peace. And in the shadows she'd left behind, 1,000 others continued the fight, each one carrying a piece of the legend, each one ready to become the storm that brings justice to those who thought themselves untouchable. The dragon was dead. Long live the dragon. 10 years after Rebecca Thompson's funeral, Fort Thunder had been rebuilt as a model of military integrity. The warehouse where Dragon 7 had revealed herself was now a training center for ethics and accountability. A small plaque near the door read, "In memory of those who stood against corruption, seen and unseen." Captain Jessica Chen, now a major, stood in that warehouse addressing a new class of recruits. She told them about the importance of integrity, about the courage to report wrongdoing, about the strength found in justice. She never mentioned Dragon 7 by name. That legend had passed into classified files and whispered stories. As the recruits filed out, Jessica's secure phone buzzed, a message in code she hadn't seen in years. Primary nest compromised, 7 stars falling. Her blood chilled. The 7 stars were the original Dragon unit's emergency protocol, supposedly destroyed with their deaths. If someone was using that code now, she noticed one recruit hadn't left. A young woman, small and unremarkable, standing by the memorial plaque. As Jessica approached, the woman turned, and for just a moment, Jessica saw something impossible. The woman's eyes were Sarah Mitchell's exact shade of blue, but Sarah Mitchell had been dead for 15 years, and Rebecca Thompson for 10. "Major Chen," the woman said, and her voice carried an echo of something familiar. "My grandmother left me something to give to you." She handed Jessica a worn challenge coin. A dragon wrapped around a sword. 7 stars. An 8th star had been added, but there was now a 9th, freshly etched. "Who was your grandmother?" Jessica asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The young woman smiled, and it was Sarah Mitchell's smile, Rebecca Thompson's kindness, and something entirely new all at once. Someone who taught me that dragons never truly die. They just wait for the next generation to need them. She walked away, leaving Jessica holding the coin, wondering if she'd just met the future or a ghost of the past. As the young woman reached the door, she paused and looked back. She also said to tell you, the dead weight you dismiss today becomes the storm that changes tomorrow. I'm still trying to understand what that means. She left, and Jessica stood alone in the warehouse where legend had been born, holding proof that legends never truly die. They just transform, waiting for the moment when the world needs them to rise again.